Please help me welcome to the stage, Sharon Lewis.
So, as I was saying, I'm a light-skinned mother of 2 dark-skinned children with disabilities. And raising my kids gave me a unique, invisible vantage point. What this means is that I got to overhear strangers' comments when we were in public, because I wasn't recognized as their mother. I got to hear things that weren't necessarily meant for my ears. And what I heard was comments about their differences. These comments, even though they may have been innocent, questioned my kids' worth and looks and brought shame to their differences. What I was seeing when I was seeing this is exclusion. So my definition of exclusion is when someone doesn't have the same access to the goodies in life that other people have. And it includes shunning, ignoring, rejecting, and marginalizing. One of the nasty things about exclusion is that it can show up disguised. Shows up disguised in subtle comments and body language. Before my children arrived, I thought of exclusion differently. I was very naive about it, and it was lived in a conceptual level. In my junior year of college, my black roommate shared with me the experience of growing up black. She spoke about the prejudices, the disparity in household income, and diminished self-worth, as well as gaps in opportunity. Hearing her stories was like lifting a carpet to find an ugly truth. Weren't there laws in place? Didn't the civil disobedience, didn't the Didn't the Civil Rights Act wipe that kind of thing out? After college, I saw exclusion's tragic impact when I worked at a state hospital. The residents there had been warehoused for life. They were given life sentences simply because they were born with a disability. And I'll never forget the residents I met there. Let me tell you about Lizzie. Lizzie's in her 70s. She's lived her entire life on the ward of a state hospital. She's had virtually no choice about anything to do with her personal life, including a simple thing like what she'll eat or wear. She spends her days and nights at the mercy of the people working in that hospital. And most tragically, the contributions that Lizzie has for humanity and for the world are lost in the echoes of that cold, drab building. Lizzie was sentenced to that life because she had 2 clubbed feet at a time when medicine and laws were not in place to intercept her sentence. I saw a huge injustice for Lizzie and for the other residents when I was there. And I knew that civil rights laws for people with disabilities were beginning to emerge, so I had confidence that those laws would change that picture. You can see how I was relating to exclusion very naively and as a concept. I actually thought laws would cover it. It took raising my kids and seeing exclusion's ugly face through the lens of personal experience to see that laws alone are not enough to extinguish exclusion. Let me tell you about the stings of exclusion as my kids grew up. I saw the effect of the covert conversations and subtle reactions towards them. As a mother, this gave me huge concern for how they might see themselves. I can't tell you how much anguish I felt when I'd go to pick my kids up at school and I would find them sitting alone away from their peers. I remember that when my son was in high school, I would go to pick him up and he would get up to leave and he would shout out a goodbye, and nobody would even look up to acknowledge him. I felt a lot of anger at the other parents at church who didn't encourage their children to include my children. And I just wanted to scream when people paid lip service to their differences and didn't try to get into their worlds to include them. So here's what raising my kids has taught me about exclusion. We just don't want to talk about it. We want to pretend that it's not there. The topic of exclusion feels big and messy, and it provokes social anxiety. It makes us feel uncomfortable. We're afraid to say anything because it might label us or embarrass us. And second, it's hard for us to actually even see exclusion. Exclusion is interwoven into the very fabric of our lives. It's part of our culture. Our brains are wired for exclusion. As long ago as 2.5 million years, we lived in small, intimate, nomadic bands, and everyone knew everyone in that small group. Our survival depended on viewing an outsider, the one who was different, the one who was not us, as suspect. So in this example, it's easy to see how we could become wired for exclusion. Think about that. Our brain wiring dictates whether we see another human being as safe or as having value. Our wiring dictates exclusion. Exclusion's not limited to disability and race. It can show up anywhere. So look in your own life and see where you're excluding people. Be honest. Really look. How do you interact with someone who's different from you? Do you avert your eyes if you see a bald woman walking in your direction in the mall? Do you avoid eye contact with a Muslim woman wearing a hijab or with someone wearing a turban? Do you avoid talking to someone you know is going to be difficult to understand? What do you do when you see someone in a wheelchair at the grocery store struggling to reach something? If you saw these two kids, would you avert your eyes or would you stare? How would you react to them? Would you pity them? These are my children. Have you just gotten in touch with a part of exclusion you weren't aware was there? I, too, have caught myself in exclusion's clutch many times. Let me tell you about a particular time. I took my very different-looking son to physical therapy for the first time, and there was a little girl there with Down syndrome. I was surprised and embarrassed by my reaction. The feelings just rushed in, and I felt myself feeling pity and disgust about her. As a mother of children with disabilities, I too am wired for exclusion. By the way, these reactions are not a personal choice. You could say they're inherited from a multitude of generations preceding our birth. They're knee-jerk and not thought through, the result of millions of years of programming. Now, laws to protect people, to protect rights, are in place. And don't misunderstand me. These laws are an absolute must, but they do nothing for the wiring, for the brain wiring. There are places that laws don't easily reach. Laws cannot mandate those automatic, subtle comments, body language, and reactions. So while our reactions to people who are different from us may not be a personal choice, they are a personal responsibility. Today, I invite you to develop an awareness of those simple automatic reactions that hold exclusion in place. Take responsibility for your part in them. And I'm going to leave you with 3 simple actions. While these actions may be simple, they aren't going to be easy considering that we're wired for exclusion. First, get to know your neighbors. Doesn't that sound novel? Go beyond a quick wave and a smile. Second, make eye contact with people, including people who are different from you. And third, strike up conversations with new people. Find out what's important to them. Even if it feels strange to break the ice with a stranger, do it anyway. And finally, I invite you to take on what my now 27-year-old son wants the world to take on. Be authentic about differences. Don't pretend they aren't there. The important thing for all of us to remember is at the very heart of it, what we simply want is to be included. Thank you.